You wouldn't last 24 hours as a Roman gladiator, and it's not just because of the fighting. The real reason is darker, stranger, and way more brutal than anyone expects. It's not what school taught you, and it's not what movies showed you. So what was really waiting behind those arena gates, before the first sword was even drawn? Well, for starters, Roman arenas weren't designed for fair fights. They were built for entertainment, and the entertainment was rigged from the moment you stepped onto sand. Matchups weren't based on skill levels, but calculated to create the most dramatic possible fights. Fighting in the arena was like playing a video game where the computer always cheats, except losing meant actual death instead of restarting. Organizers paired different gladiator types specifically because their fighting styles would create exciting conflicts. The crowd didn't just watch, they controlled outcomes. Their cheers and boos influenced whether a defeated gladiator lived or died. Your survival depended on whether thousands of drunk strangers enjoyed your performance. The thumbs up or down was a real-time decision about tomorrow. New gladiators faced terrible odds. About 1 in 5 died during their first match. Starting as a gladiator was like beginning a job where there was a solid chance you wouldn't make it to lunch break. Some events replaced human opponents with wild animals. Lions, bears, and other predators were deliberately starved before fights to make them aggressive. Fighting a hungry lion with just a sword was like bringing a knife to a claw fight. Fight duration varied wildly. Some lasted minutes if someone made a fatal mistake quickly. Others dragged on over an hour, exhausting everyone. Referees existed but rarely stopped fights unless action became boring. They were less like sports officials and more like television producers, keeping the show interesting. Even winners usually got hurt badly. Clean victories without serious wounds were rare. Most fights ended with both gladiators bleeding heavily. Winning just meant you got to live with your pain instead of dying from it. Many fighters entered with previous injuries still healing. Your body became a living museum of every fight survived. The sand wasn't decorative, but there to soak up blood and make cleanup easier. But the arena itself was just the beginning of your problems. Training as a gladiator meant 12 to 14 hours of brutal conditioning every day, 6 days a week. Your body wasn't yours anymore. It belonged to the schedule, designed to break you down before building you back up as a fighting machine. It was like going to a gym that never closed, run by people who thought rest was a 4-letter word. Training started before dawn and didn't end until you could barely stand. The only break was when you literally couldn't move anymore. Wooden training swords called rudies were deliberately heavier than real weapons. The extra weight built muscle through constant repetition. When you finally got a real sword, it would feel light by comparison. It was like training for a marathon while wearing concrete shoes. Every movement had to be perfect. Footwork drills went on for hours. Shield positioning was practiced until automatic. Striking techniques were repeated thousands of times until your muscles remembered without thinking. The men supervising training were called doctores. Former gladiators who had survived long enough to become teachers. They knew every trick and weakness because they had lived through it, and they had zero tolerance for mistakes. Making an error didn't earn helpful advice. It got you beaten with wooden sticks and whips. Pain was the most effective teacher, and these instructors had advanced degrees in delivering it. You learned to do things right the first time, or you learned while bleeding. The diet was strange and intentional. Instead of building muscle like modern athletes, gladiators were fed to add fat. Barley, beans, and grains made you softer. This wasn't poor meal planning. It was deliberate. Why fat fighters? Body fat cushioned wounds so you wouldn't die from the first cut. A softer gladiator also bled more dramatically, and crowds loved seeing blood flow. Your body was being prepared to bleed beautifully, like a human ketchup packet. Sleep happened on straw mats or stone floors. Water was rationed. Hygiene was terrible. The smell was like a locker room sealed shut for a year. Skin infections were common just from daily training, but all this conditioning was just preparing your body for the equipment you'd actually fight in. Roman gladiator armor wasn't built to protect you. It was designed to make you look impressive while potentially dying in spectacular fashion. The helmet alone weighed between 4 and 15 pounds. Wearing one was like strapping a bowling ball to your head and then trying to dance. Eye holes in most helmets were deliberately small. Limited vision made fights more dangerous and unpredictable. The crowd wanted blood, mistakes, and drama, not two perfectly protected fighters circling cautiously. Some gladiator types wore almost no armor at all. The retiarius fought with just a net, trident, and minimal protection. They were basically dressed for fishing, except the fish had swords and wanted to kill them. The lack of armor gave audiences more exposed skin to see get cut. Shields could reach 3 feet in height, made from layers of wood and leather. Carrying one was like holding a heavy door while someone tried to stab around it. Your shield arm would scream in pain within minutes. The gladius was only 18 to 24 inches long. This wasn't for elegant dueling, but close combat stabbing. Fighting with a gladius meant getting close enough to count your opponent's teeth before trying to remove them. Different gladiator types used completely different equipment: nets and tridents, curved daggers, scythes. The variety created interesting matchups for crowds. It was like deadly rock, paper, scissors, except every choice could actually kill you. Leather straps holding armor cut into skin during fights, causing infections. The leather got soaked with sweat and blood, then dried and became more abrasive. Heat buildup under metal was serious. Your armor was trying to cook you alive while your opponent tried to stab you to death. The mismatched equipment between gladiator classes was engineered to create advantages and disadvantages. Some fighters were fast but lightly armored. Others are slow but heavily protected. Romans designed these imbalances for exciting, unpredictable fights, but the equipment was only part of what made survival nearly impossible. Roman gladiators weren't volunteers signing up for ancient extreme sports. Most were slaves, prisoners of war, or criminals who had zero choice in becoming fighters. Being a gladiator was like getting a job interview where the only question was, can you bleed entertainingly? The few people who actually volunteered were drowning in debt so deep that fighting wild animals seemed reasonable. These volunteers signed contracts saying, I give up my human rights and might die horribly for your entertainment. Well, that tells you something about Roman bankruptcy laws. Once you became a gladiator, you belonged to a lanista. This person wasn't your coach. He was your owner in the most literal sense. The lanista controlled when you woke up, what you ate, when you trained, and when you slept. He could beat you, sell you, or even kill you if he felt like it. Your legal rights disappeared the moment you entered the ludus, the gladiator school. It was like signing a contract written in disappearing ink, except what disappeared was your freedom. The lanista treated his gladiators like livestock, though maybe not that valuable since livestock don't fight to the death for sport. Gladiators were branded with hot irons like cattle. A scar burned into your skin marked you as property forever. Even if you earned freedom later, that brand would always remind everyone where you came from. The physical mark was permanent, but the social stigma was worse. Daily life was controlled completely. You couldn't decide what to wear, when to eat, or where to go. The ludus was surrounded by high walls and guards. Freedom became just a word you remembered from your old life, like trying to remember chocolate after eating gruel for months. Food was basic barley, beans, and grains. This wasn't about keeping you healthy. It was about keeping you alive long enough to put on a good show for crowds. You ate what they gave you, which was basically ancient prison food with worse service, but the legal reality was just the foundation of an even darker truth. Getting wounded in the arena was just the beginning of real problems. Roman medical treatment was primitive and often made injuries worse instead of better. Trying to heal from gladiator wounds was like expecting a broken leg to fix itself with duct tape and good intentions. Vinegar served as the primary antiseptic because it was cheap and available. Open wounds were doused with vinegar to prevent infection. The burning was incredible, but infection usually meant death. Medical treatment involved pouring salad dressing on sword cuts and hoping for the best. Bandages were made from dirty, reused fabric. The same strips might be used on several fighters, spreading infection. It was like a hospital where they washed sheets once a month if you were lucky. Cauterization was standard for serious bleeding, a red-hot iron pressed directly against wounds to seal them. They basically used branding irons as medical devices. The scar tissue was tough but inflexible, limiting movement forever. Antibiotics didn't exist. Once infection started, your body either fought it off or you died slowly. Many gladiators survived arena fights only to die weeks later from infected wounds. Your immune system was your only pharmacy, and it frequently ran out of stock. Broken bones were set with wooden splints and leather straps. Bones rarely healed straight, leaving permanent deformities. It was like having a carpenter repair your skeleton using scrap wood. Maggot therapy was actually advanced treatment. Live maggots ate dead tissue while leaving healthy flesh alone. It worked better than most medical options, but having insects living in your wounds wasn't pleasant. Gladiators with disfigured faces and twisted limbs often kept fighting. They had no choice. Every gladiator school maintained burial grounds due to high death rates. It was like a workplace with an on-site graveyard. Pain management meant gritting teeth and enduring it. Your body became a walking reminder of every battle fought. The physical damage was brutal, but the mental toll was something else entirely. Living as a gladiator meant constant psychological torture worse than any physical wound. Daily life involves knowing tomorrow might be your last day alive, and that stress destroys minds over time. It was like having severe anxiety disorder, except your worst fears regularly came true in front of cheering crowds. Roman society treated gladiators as the lowest form of human entertainment. Even popular fighters were still considered property or criminals. You might become famous, but you were famous the same way a dancing bear is famous. People cheered but didn't respect you as a person. Social stigma followed gladiators everywhere. Respectable citizens avoided them completely. You were simultaneously famous and despised, which created special mental torture. The same crowds that cheered for you in combat wouldn't acknowledge you on the streets. Some gladiators were forced to fight and kill their own friends or training partners. Having to murder your roommate for entertainment while thousands applauded was psychological devastation. These weren't strangers, but often the only people who understood your experience. Crowd loyalty was fickle and cruel. They might worship you one day and demand your death the next. It was like being a celebrity where falling out of favor meant getting fed to lions. Spectators cheered for violence and death, not the human creating it. They wanted blood and dramatic endings. You were just the tool they used to create entertainment. The crowd didn't care about your background or dreams, only how spectacularly you could bleed. Retirement was extremely rare, only possible after years of survival or special sponsorship. Most didn't live long enough to earn freedom. It was like a career where the retirement plan was hopefully not dying for 20 years straight. Even successful gladiators only gained minor wealth and temporary fame. You might earn enough for better food, but you were still someone else's property. Money couldn't purchase freedom or respect. The psychological pressure never stopped. Every day brought training, injuries, and reminders that your next fight could be your last. Your entire existence revolved around preparing to die for other people's amusement. Some gladiators went insane from stress. Others became emotionally numb to violence. Your mind either broke under pressure or transformed into something barely human. The truth is that being a Roman gladiator was a nightmare most modern people couldn't survive for 24 hours.